VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Well, thank you, Mr. Morris, and welcome to Crosstalk, where we talk about the issues, and we are going to be certainly talking about issues today. Basically, the issue that apparently it doesn't seem like anybody cares about it. And I'd like to hear, of course, some feedback from you, our listeners, all across the country. But we're going to be talking about borders. Now, we live in houses that have, walls around them to protect us and to give us privacy and control over our domestic and personal affairs. We don't just have a roof and open sides. There's defined territory and the disciplines that go along with the family life. But we live in a nation today which apparently has got a problem regarding its borders. And our guest today is a gentleman who is in Pensacola, Florida. He's a local pastor of an independent Baptist church. He is also a talk show host who airs his program on a number of stations in the Pensacola area. His name is Chuck Baldwin, and it's a privilege to have Chuck with us today on Crosstalk. Good to have you with us, Pastor.
Thank you, Vic, very much. A delight to be with you.
Pastor, you mentioned that you got into the talk show business about the time Bill Clinton stirred everything up.
Yes, that was 1994. It was the election of 92 when Bill Clinton became president that kind of shook me out of my lethargy and made me realize that I had a responsibility outside, speaking of walls, outside the four walls of my church. And I decided at that time that I needed to pray and seek God as to what I should do. He led me to start the radio talk show, and I did that in 1994. And ever since, I've been engaged in addressing the issues, both by radio. I'm a syndicated columnist. My columns go all over the country, as well as other mediums. And I just really think that we as Christians have an obligation to try to give to our posterity the principles and the values that were given to us that we might maintain this free nation today.
I know there are those within conservative evangelicalism that would say, well, but, the rapture's coming and, the world's going to perdition in a handbasket anyway, so why should we? I mean, Custer had it coming.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I hear that all the time, and I cringe every time I hear it. If the Founding Fathers had that philosophy, we would still be a crown colony today, Vic. It was the diligence and the activity of that generation, of preachers especially, but also of statesmen, of politicians, of lawyers, of men of medicine, and every other medium that took a stand in that generation for right, for freedom, for independence. They paid the price, the sacrifice was made, and they bequeathed to us, their posterity, a free and independent nation. We cannot do anything less than they did. If we do not engage the culture, if we do not stand as vigorously as they did, we will not be able to maintain freedom in the future generations.
As we see the decadence that's occurring, as we realize that national sovereignty is on the counter, and people are standing by with their hatchets ready to chop it to pieces. We've got people with all sorts of ideas. We've got Supreme Court judges dashing off to Europe to find out how issues are handled outside of this country. Sadly, don't think we have enough intelligence in our own country to solve our issues. We have now an issue which appears that nobody, at least in the assumed future leadership of our country, gives a hoot about national boundaries.
Yes, and I think the two are related, because what I think is going on here, Vic, is an attempt by the elitists of both political parties and the commercial conglomerates that fund them to merge America into a globalistic or regional government. I think that's really what's going on here. I think that there is a group of people, very powerful and very well placed, that do not want to see America continue as a sovereign, independent nation. They want to merge us into a globalistic or at least regional kind of governance. And to do that, you've got to destroy the borders, because as you said, a home, a house, a state, a country, everything depends on borders. I remember whenever Ronald Reagan said that a nation that cannot defend its borders is not a nation. And that's exactly what you were saying at the opening of the show here. You were suggesting that if we don't have borders, we don't have a home, we don't have a nation. And so I think the goal is to break down the borders so that we might merge America into this regional government, this North American Union that President Bush is trying to push us into. And you're right. Most of the politicians, in my article that you're alluding to here that I just wrote, most of the politicians from both parties, especially when you look at the presidential frontrunners, have no interest or very little in addressing the border problem.
You've got John Edwards, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and of course you've got John McCain, Mitt Romney, Rudy Giuliani. Nobody wants to address this thing. Why? Why is it that, I mean, do you see an underlying mentality here that supposedly we're not seeing?
Yes. It goes back to what I just said, Vic. I really think that what's behind this is a drive towards globalism.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is biblical. I mean, when you look at the Scripture, you go back into the Old Testament, and this is exactly what the powerful men of that era did back at the Tower of Babel. Mm-hmm. What did they want to do? They wanted to bring all the people together in one government, in one economy, and in one religion. And, of course, God intervened miraculously and divided the nations. And ever since then, God established nationhood. And you go into both Testaments, and you can read where God established nationhood. And He desires that nations be separate, independent, and sovereign until the day that King Jesus, the one and only
Amen.
King of the universe, comes to rule and reign. But until then, of course, it is Satan's attempt to try and merge the worlds, the countries of the world together under his dominion. And so I think from a spiritual point of view, we look at this and we say, look, this is a devilish thing going on. I think it transcends politics. I think this is spiritual in nature. But also from a political point of view, we're sacrificing our sovereignty. We're sacrificing our Constitution. We're sacrificing the rule of law in our country, and we are giving our nation over to globalism.
Let's aim a little closer specifically as you make an assessment of what President Bush has done or not done on the illegal immigrant problem. What do you see there?
Oh, President Bush has been the biggest culprit in this particular issue of all presidents combined, I could say. When you stop and consider this hard, cold fact, Vic, and I want the listeners to really think hard on this, do you realize that nearly half of all of the illegal immigrants that we have in America today have come into this country since George W. Bush was first elected President of the United States?
And they say that a high percentage of people who are not even Hispanic are coming through those borders.
Correct. And the truth of the matter is we don't even know who all is coming across. Mm-hmm. Obviously, illegal aliens don't advertise their entrance into the country. I feel certain that we already have potential terrorists in the country that have come up through especially the southern border, but also let's not forget Canada. We don't really know what kind of terrorists are already here in the country. And, you know, when do we find out? Well, whenever something tragic happens. The time to fix it is not then. The time to fix it is now. And unfortunately, both major parties do not seem to want to fix this problem.
I don't normally watch public broadcasting, but I stumbled into something that caught my attention this past weekend. And it was a program dealing with biological warfare. And when I saw some of the experiments way back in the 50s, how they could take one jet plane and propagate enough simulated biological material and have it distributed. They said one jet plane alone, one small fighter plane with enough of the biological warfare could literally corrupt an entire city. Now, if we're talking about, it gave examples of the experimentation that went on in secluded places in our country, just determining how effective germ warfare would be. Now, this is back in the 50s. But I was saying to somebody here not too long ago that if someone coming across those borders brought with them biological warfare or some other type of a heinous device, say it was a small suitcase nuclear device,
right,
or there were several, and they were planted in various parts of our country, and then a threat was made and indicated that they would demonstrate at a certain time one of these things goes off. And in fact it did. And say now there are some others planted and the second one goes off as predicted. We would be in a position to have to knuckle our knees and simply, we'd have to surrender. Well,
yeah, obviously we're not going to do that. We're not going to surrender, at least not all of us.
No, not at all.
But you got to wonder, if you and I can figure this out, the people in Washington are not stupid people.
No.
These people are very intelligent. They have sources of information that you and I don't have. They have to be aware and cognizant of these possibilities. So the question that you and I need to ask, and I think all the listeners need to ask themselves, is why? Why is it that our president and those who are seeking the presidency in 2008 are refusing to address this? And when they do address it, they always fall back to the same old mantra of giving illegal aliens a path to citizenship, opening the doors of immigration even wider, both illegal and legal, or actually just take illegal immigration and just call it legal immigration. So now you don't even have illegal immigration anymore because now we just make it all legal. You got to ask the question, why? Knowing that these possibilities are there, knowing that you have the potential for disaster in the near future as a result of these policies, why do they continue the policy? And there's some speculation of that, and some people suggest that perhaps one of the reasons they do this is because it allows them to give more credence to the idea of greater security measures and bringing the cage down over the American people, so to speak, and eliminating personal freedoms and accruing more power to the federal government so as to, protect us from all these quote-unquote terrorists that they themselves are allowing into the country. I just think that the American people need to sit back and say, wait a minute, this is a very serious problem that our major leaders are not addressing. They're putting our very lives and our security in jeopardy, and it's time that we hold them, our political leaders, accountable.
Our guest today is Dr. Chuck Baldwin, the pastor of the Crossroads Baptist Church in Pensacola, Florida. He is also a talk show host heard throughout the Pensacola area and as well written all over the country in his editorials and columns. We are so grateful for his being with us during this program. We're talking about America's borders. We're talking about national sovereignty. And, Chuck, as we're talking about not just the borders, but we're also talking about an economy using a new kind of currency called the Amero.
Yes, exactly.
We'll be back in 60 seconds. This is Crosstalk on VCY America. And welcome back to Crosstalk. Vic Eliason, your host today. Our special guest, Dr. Chuck Baldwin, pastor of Crossroads Baptist Church in Pensacola, Florida, also a talk show host in the Pensacola area, and a columnist providing conservative ideas and thought and challenging the ideas of America all across our country. And as we're talking about these issues, Doctor, I wonder if you would address the issue of the Amero. We were talking as we left the scene here a moment ago about the economy and the Amero. We've heard about the euro, but how would this Amero thing work?
Right. Thank you very much, Vic. It's great to be with you again. I think we have to understand that this lust for power that is intrinsic to carnal men is first and foremost a lust for money and wealth. This is as old as human history itself. There's nothing new about it. What we have going on here is a desire for greater and greater wealth, meaning greater and greater power. I really believe that what's happening here in terms of this open border situation and the merging together, the North American Union and the NAFTA superhighway and all this, it's all about wealth. It's all about money, trade, commerce. It's taking national commerce and expanding it to the international level. And how many times do we hear about the international economy today, global economy? We hear that all the time. And that's the goal. And what they want to do as they work toward this North American Union, which is the merger, if listeners are not familiar with it, it's the merger of Mexico, the United States, and Canada into one regional trilateral government. And I'm not making this up. You can go on the government's own website and read it. It's called the Security and Prosperity Partnership, SPP for short, and it's set up. President Bush met with the President of Mexico and the President of Canada back in 2005, and they've already agreed to this. Congress has had no vote on this. The people have had no vote on this. In fact, many people don't even know that it exists, but it's already been settled by the leaders of the three countries. The heads of the Commerce Department in each of those nations serves as the head of the agency, and they are already merging this economy of the three countries together. That's why I'm sure that President Bush does not want to close the border. That's why he's allowing the Mexicans especially to come up across that southern border almost without restraint, because it goes along with the agreement that he made back in 2005 when he created the SPP.
Now, Chuck, how can he do this there's economy involved with this. This is
Sure.
spending of money.
Sure.
How can he do this without Congress's approval?
Boy, if you could answer that question, Vic, we could solve a lot of problems.
Yes.
You know, how many things have presidents done without any congressional oversight or even authorization? But he's done it. I mean, this is past tense. He's already done it. Now, the Amero is the currency that will generate this new economy, as in Europe. The euro, which is a currency that travels among the nations of Europe. No borders to that currency. Well, that's the idea of the Amero. It would allow the North American Union to interact with one common currency, and they call it the Amero.
Now, I can see that it wouldn't take long to unite the euro and the Amero and then have that one common currency worldwide.
Well, that's exactly right. You know, that I think ultimately that's the goal. Mm-hmm. I do believe that this is Bible scholars have called it the revived Roman Empire. There's other names for it, but it's the creation. It's the attempted creation of a global government, not under Jesus Christ, not under the rule and the reign of our Savior, but under Satan's domain. Now, let me just say a word here, Vic. I think it's important that Christian people not take a fatalistic attitude here. And I'm a pre-tribulation rapturist. I believe in the rapture. In my personal view of eschatology, okay? And I know I have many good friends that are post-millennial or mid-trib, or there's so many different views out there. But regardless of where we come down on that issue, regardless of our personal understanding of eschatology, it's important that we understand, as Christians, we have an obligation to stand against evil and to promote what is right. We cannot take a fatalistic approach and say, well, we're in the last days and this is the way it's going to be and there's nothing we can do about it. Again, if the Founding Fathers had acted that way, we would not be a free and independent nation today. We don't know what God will do with us if we will do our best.
If it didn't matter, why did he say in the word, abhor that which is evil?
Absolutely. And he said that when the Son of Man cometh, will he find faith on the earth? Meaning, and he said, occupy till I come, regardless of when he comes. And our understanding of when he comes may be flawed. Regardless of when he comes, We are to occupy. That is a strong word of action and activity, meaning that we have an obligation to stand for what's right, to be the salt of the earth, to be the light of the world. We cannot sit back in indifference and lethargy and say, well, there's nothing I can do about it. That's exactly what the enemy wants us to do.
Looking at the issue, of course, where we find the border issue, seems to make no difference between either party.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that true conservatives are ready to ditch, say, the Republican Party due to the compromise on the issue and a number of others?
I think it's inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
Sooner or later, it's inevitable. I believe that every principled conservative at some point in his or her conscience is going to have to say, I can no longer support a party that will betray not only my personal values as a Christian, but the fundamental principles upon which our nation was built, namely, as we're talking today, the security of our borders. And right now, neither major party is interested in really addressing this issue, and so therefore, what are conservative Christians and other principled people going to do in 2008? In my column, I suggested that there are 3 contenders for the Republican nomination for president that are solid on the border issue. And they are Duncan Hunter, Ron Paul, and Tom Tancredo. Now, they're not going to have the support of the party elite. They're not going to have the support of the money people. They're not going to get the establishment credentials, etc. So their only chance of support is going to come from grassroots Republicans. I would encourage every Republican to get behind these 3 men. If they fail to achieve the nomination, then I believe, and I'm hopeful, that one or all of them would have the courage at that point to say, I can no longer stay with the Republican Party and go to a third party. I suggested in my column that they go to the Constitution Party.
And here's the issue on that, Chuck. Even within the Constitution Party, you've got the pro-life issue where some are one side, one the other. This is something that...
well, the Constitution Party itself is solid in its commitment to the life issue. There is no question about that. Mm-hmm. It is. In fact, it's the most principled party that we have in America on the life issue. There is no other party out there that even comes close to the principled position for life that the Constitution Party is. So I hope, and I'm hopeful that one or all 3 of those men, after having failed in their presidential attempt, would go to the Constitution Party, would bring their followers with them, and that millions of principled conservatives, independents, and Republicans would come into the Constitution Party and give to that party a genuine opportunity, a genuine alternative to the 2 major parties in 2008.
Now, one of the things I think, as I was watching the Nancy Pelosi thing and unfold before our eyes, we also realize that Nancy Pelosi's daughter has been playing her violin, proverbial here, playing her tunes for a new kind of evangelical. And the ridiculous stuff that was displayed, they called them evangelicals. They looked like people high on drugs, jumping up and down, cavorting back and forth, rock and roll style religion, whatever it was. And she actually played up to the new kind of evangelical that was less conservative. Mm-hmm. What does this say about the base of conservative Christianity today? You've got the emerging church now, which comes out with the strange and bizarre stuff.
Right. I think that's an excellent question, Vic. It really is, because I think the evangelical community is really divided. I think that there is that element that you're bringing up here that does not share the traditional historic principles of what we call evangelicalism, and then you have those like us that do, and I think there are others too that would not say or identify themselves as conservatives, but who share their love for American principles. And as an evangelical Christian, this is something that I try to bring out over and over again when I get a chance. We have to start thinking outside of the categorization. In other words, somebody calls themselves a Christian, so automatically they should get our support. Or they call themselves an evangelical, so automatically they should get our support, regardless of where they stand on the issues and the principles. I think those days are over.
Yes.
We have to quit going by titles And remember that tags don't mean a lot. We have to start paying close attention to the individual principles that they do or do not espouse. And on this particular issue, I cannot think of a more important issue confronting the American people in the next few years than the issue of the borders, the loss of our sovereignty, this North American Union potential, etc. If we don't stand and fight for our freedom and our independence now, in just a few years, we will not be a free and independent nation.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to open our phone lines across the nation. Our telephone number is 800-733-9829. If you'd like to join us, I see the lines already lighting up, 800-733-9829. The lines are jammed at this moment. And we'll take your calls visiting today with Chuck Baldwin. And you're open to your discussions, your thoughts, agreeing or disagreeing. We're giving you the opportunity to call and make your points close, quick, and short, because I have a feeling we're going to have busy lines here throughout the rest of the program. So we're going to go right now to Racine, and caller on the line, go right ahead.
Yeah, hey, Vic. I'll make this quick. The thing is, until our president addressed these borders, that we're letting all these... The problem is in America, the rich don't... They want the immigrants over here because then they can pay less wages. They want to slowly weed the unions out, the middle class. I watched a show the other night on TV, and they said within 5 years the middle class will be weeded out of this country. And they want to get rid of the unions because why the rich don't want to pay somebody $20 an hour, $15 an hour fair living wage. They want the immigrants where they can pay them $6, $7 an hour. And with all these immigrants coming over here, too, we got to realize that we're depleting our Social Security fund, where we got people that work 30, 40 years in America, old people I know, that they can't even support themselves. They're taking everything away from them, and they're giving it to the immigrants. So we can't take care of our own people.
Thank you very much for that comment. Racine, Wisconsin. We now go several hundred miles north of Pelkey, Michigan. James, you are on the air. Go ahead.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Eliason, for taking my call today.
Yes.
I'd just like to make a brief statement about the Constitution Party. I believe Pastor Baldwin made a statement that they are the strongest party on the life issue, and I'd like to thank you, Vic, for bringing up the pro-life issue because, to be honest, I was surprised to hear Pastor Baldwin say that. I ran for state representative with the Constitution Party in Michigan 2 times, 2004 and 2006. And in fact, I voted for Pastor Baldwin in 2004 for vice president. But there has been a compromise on the pro-life issue. The Constitution Party is not 100% pro-life in its actions, and it is not worthy of the support of 100% pro-life Christians. And for more information, people can go to www.theamericanview.com, and you can read up more on the issue. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a moment of break and be right back. This is Crosstalk on VCY America. And welcome back to Crosstalk as we continue our visit. Our guest today, Chuck Baldwin, a local pastor in Pensacola, a columnist, a radio talk show host. And Chuck, before we go further, the comments there I know would be something you'd like to respond to. Go ahead.
Right, to caller right before the break. I have a very different interpretation of what he's referring to, and I disagree with him vehemently. It's very unfair in my judgment to categorize the Constitution Party as not being pro-life. They certainly are. He's referring to an internal vote that took place a few months back in which part of the party believed that it was the responsibility of the National Committee to disaffiliate a state affiliate because of the personal opinions of one of its leaders. And after much discussion and debate, the vote came down and the National Party voted that they would not disaffiliate the entire state party because of the personal opinions of one of its leaders, and good men had a disagreement on that issue, and they came down on two different sides of that issue. But that is a far cry from saying that the party is not pro-life, and I strongly disagree with the caller. The Constitution Party is solid in its commitment to life. Again, there is no political party anywhere in this country that is more pro-life than is the Constitution Party.
Well, we are going to move right along here, again, making it very clear our discussions and opinions are personal of all of our callers. We're going to go to Klamath Falls, Oregon, talk with Tony. And Tony, you're on the air. Go right ahead.
Hi, Vic. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes.
See, Dr. Baldwin, the motivation for the so-called North American Union is centered on the future access to natural resources in this region of the world. And futurologists project that to maintain our country's standard of living, the North American Union is an absolute necessity. Do you think this is valid?
No, I do not. I think that is a smokescreen for a greater agenda. And I think, again, the greater agenda is to bring about a globalistic government with the idea of international commerce being at the center. I think that is something that they use to try and justify what they are doing. But I do not believe that is the actual root.
Appreciate that, Tony. From Klamath Falls, let's go right back to Pensacola on line 4. Don, go ahead.
Thank you, Vic, and God bless you, Chuck. This is Don Cowan calling. I'm a former member of your church out there at Crossroads Baptist Church.
Mm-hmm. I remember you, Don. Good to hear from you.
I love you, brother, and I agree with everything you're saying.
God bless you.
Your church, many times I've driven by it, and they've got the crosses out front, hundreds, if not thousands of them, representing the abortions of our precious babies.
Don, what are your thoughts regarding the topic today?
My thoughts regarding the topic today are, why would we want this road connecting America to two Roman Catholic countries, Mexico and Canada, which teach a work salvation, which is ludicrous. And my other point that I wanted to make was, I believe this whole paper is about our country catering to the rich, which we are just famous for.
Okay, your comments there, Chuck.
Yeah, well, the Roman Catholicism aside, what we're doing here is we are surrendering our sovereignty. And he's referring to the road he's talking about is what they call the NAFTA superhighway. This is going to come up through
Kansas City and right 4 miles from my home in northern Minnesota.
There you go, all the way from the Mexican border to the Canadian border, and then it'll go east and west corridors thereby, therefrom. By the way, Jeremy Corsi, my good friend, has done a yeoman's work in researching all of this. His columns appear regularly on newswithviews.com and worldnetdaily.com, and I would encourage listeners to read Jeremy's work on this. He has really done the research, and that is the area that Don was talking about there, that NAFTA superhighway, which is all a part of this merger between the three countries.
Richard in Mobile, Alabama, go right ahead.
Yeah, I think that the Lord is, well, I don't think, I know, the Lord is in total control of the whole situation. I think we have really forgotten about God's sovereignty and His control and how He's going to work. I mean, it's like the highway and all this stuff. If it's the Lord's plan into the end of times that things are going to happen, it's going to happen.
But Richard,
wait a minute, let me finish.
Okay.
I know you got to do your work until He shows. I mean, I know that.
Okay.
I agree, but we still have to realize these people, President Bush and all these people that are so wicked are controlled by Satan, but they're doing God's will. But at the same time, we're headed into judgment. The whole world is headed into judgment, and I think you can't change what's going to happen, but you can pray and see what God will have us do.
But can I jump in there, Vic?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think he's wrong. I think you can change what will happen. You know, read over there in Jeremiah chapter 18. God told the prophet, at what instant I shall speak concerning a kingdom and concerning a nation to pluck down, to pull down. If that nation repent, I will repent of the evil that I chose to do toward it. But if I choose to do good toward the nation and it do evil, I will repent of the good that I was going to do. In other words, God has given to us a free will, that we have a responsibility to Him to act in a way prescribed by Him. The results are God's, for sure. I agree with that. John Quincy Adams, one of my favorite quotes, duty is ours, results are God's. But ours is duty, and we have to do our duty. We cannot give in to fatalism and say, well, what's going to be is going to be, que sera, que sera. That is not God's plan for us. We have a responsibility to stand and be counted and do what's right, cast our lot with the Lord, and who knows? Who knows what God will do with us, Vic? Who knows what God will do with a group of people in this generation who will stand up for what is right, right now in our time, we may be able to suspend the judgment of God upon America for another 100 years, just as our forefathers did when they fought back in the 1700s for us.
You know, when the battle was raging and Moses, as long as Moses had his hand up, the battle went for the children of Israel. But when his hand was down, and he had to have, was it Aaron helped hold his hand up?
That's right, Aaron and Hur.
And it was a physical gesture on the part of the leader, which determined which way it went. God allowed that to happen.
Right.
I think the scriptures tell us, resist the devil and he will flee from you.
Absolutely.
So the resistance of the devil causes his wickedness to flee.
Right. And this is part of the problem that I think our pastors are missing. And would to God that all of our preachers across America would be standing up in their pulpits and encouraging their people to resist, to get out there and resist this evil culture in whatever form it takes, to resist. And if we would do that as a people, as a pulpit, as a church, as a community, again, we don't know what God would do. And I think we're real presumptive when we think that we can speak for God and say, well, God is going to do this and God is going to do that. We don't know what God will do. And we don't know certainly what God will do with us if we cast our lot with Him.
If fatalism was a thing, then we just cloister ourselves. We wouldn't witness. We wouldn't send missionaries because, after all, everything's predestined to happen.
Absolutely right.
Let's go to Smitty in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Vic, man, oh man, amen and yay to every word that your guest just spoke in this last segment here. And you and I both bang this drum constantly about the apathy in the faith-based, in the Christian community. And if we will just wake up and realize if our God is with us, who can stand against us? But the real point I wanted to make real quickly is, the old-timers always tell me, watch the money trail. And in America, we see something funny we don't see anywhere else in any other society. You look at the way these national-level politicians raise funds, millions and millions and millions of dollars to gain an office that pays a couple $100,000 a year and pretty good bennies. And, it isn't for the privilege of representing the will of the people. It's to profit and network globally. We got a senator right here in Wisconsin that has 400 department stores across the country. You don't think he's licking his chops at the chance to enter into a global market? And that's the real sin of what's occurring in our nation.
Smitty, thank you. From Kenosha, Wisconsin, we go to Port Huron, Michigan, and talk to Harry. Harry.
Hi there, guys. Chuck, I agree with you to a point, but my question is this. You mentioned the Constitution Party and also Christians making a difference. How are we going to make a difference? We don't have money. I mean, I've been an activist for 21 years, politically, at all levels. I don't have millions of dollars. I'd love to run for an office. I don't have national media. We don't have, you've got the network here, Vic, but we're not the president. We're not in Congress. We're not in the House and the Senate. We're not in the governor's mansions. It's a lot. You got to have money to do this kind of stuff.
Let me tell you, the real power in America still rests with we, the people. Don't ever forget that. We have the power among the people of God to make a difference in this country, especially if the pulpits will lead the way. I really firmly believe that if the pulpits of America would really stand up and speak the truth and do what Vic just said a few minutes ago and encourage their people to resist the devil in whatever form and fashion that he reveals himself across this country, we could change America tomorrow.
What about as far as the Constitution Party? I agree with the tenets of the party and a third party. I've been supporting a third party system, but the problem is we can't be featured in the debate process.
Well, again, we need some national leaders on that particular regard to help pave the way for us, and that's why I'm encouraging Ron Paul or Duncan Hunter or Tom Tancredo or all three, when they fail to get the nomination, to lead the way. If they would do that, I believe that there are millions of dissatisfied Republicans out there that are really fed up with the Republican Party and the way they're compromising fundamental values over and over again. They're tired of being promised everything at election time and then being ignored for the next 2 years until election comes around again. They're looking for an alternative. And I think if somebody would take the bull by the horns and say, look, my credibility and reputation and money and future and all this aside, I'm going to take the plunge and lead the way. And if a couple of guys would do that, I think it would shake up the political system to the point that millions of people would follow. And let's face it, political parties have evolved over the years and over the centuries. The Republicans and Democrats as we know them today were not always that way. And, in fact, when President Lincoln was elected, or when Lincoln was elected president in 1860, there was at least 4 major candidates for president in that election. President Lincoln was elected with less than 40% of the vote. We don't have to be a majority. And I think that this time right now is critical for America. And I think that there is enough dissatisfied people out there that if somebody would lead the way, I think they would follow.
Thank you so much, Harry, for your call from Port Huron, Michigan. As I think of the rhetoric that I've heard in the political environs, both in the Democratic and Republican, the references made during the last 4-6 years maybe have brought out the words evangelical Christians. That has now become a term that is used as they evaluate the voting bases that are out there. I mean, it didn't used to be. But all of a sudden it is.
Oh, there's no question, and I think that the power of this country still rests with God's people, especially the preachers.
We'll be back in 60 seconds. This is Crosstalk. Our phone number 800-733-9829. And welcome back to Crosstalk. Our national borders up for grabs. What political party is going to rescue us, or will they? Is there any hope with the Amero, the new form of currency, being discussed, with the borders and the 3 national leaders coming together and suggesting that there be a merge of some kind? Folks, obviously it's a point of concern. It's a point that America needs to address. We have callers online from Cleveland, Tennessee, Mobile, Alabama, Pensacola, and West Allis, Wisconsin. We're going to go right now to Cleveland and talk with Jim. Jim, go right ahead.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. For many years, my wife has been in the medical field, and her common phrase is, don't treat the symptom, treat the disease, and all of the answers that these candidates have are treating just the symptoms. And the actual disease, I do believe, is the immigration border control. Our economy would be stronger. The security of the nation would be better. So I would just recommend that we find out and treat what the actual disease is and not the symptom.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that very much. We're going to go to West Allis, Wisconsin, talk to Brad. Brad, you're on the air.
How you doing?
Fine, sir.
I just wanted to refer to one of your previous callers. He mentioned that they're trying to kick the unions out with this. The unions are complicit in this. They see these illegal aliens as future members, just like the politicians see votes and the businessmen see cheap labor. And we got to remember, we don't depend on Republicans and Democrats. They both lied to us. Bush and the Republicans schnookered us. The Democrats are figuring a way to snooker us. Fine. They all lie. Take your vote elsewhere. But do not leave it at home.
Well said.
I agree with that.
Yeah, you leave it at home and nothing happens. Thanks, Brad. Appreciate that. We're going to go to Pensacola. Teresa, how are you?
Yes, Vic. I'm just wanting to thank you for this show today, because for so many years I heard people saying just vote for the lesser of 2 evils. And this is the reason why we're in the mess we're in. We did not vote we lean in our own understanding instead of in God's and that's why we have created this. It has not been overnight.
Okay.
Well, I agree with that, Teresa.
Thank you, Teresa. Appreciate that.
Can I comment on that, Vic?
Please do.
You know, that's such an important point. This lesser of two evils mantra that the Republicans especially, bring out every 2 years, and so many of my fellow Christians have fallen victim to that. Just a point here. You know, I teach the Bible, and my fellow pastors do the same. Sunday school teachers throughout the country. What do? We get up, we open the Bible, we turn to the book of Daniel. And we talk about Daniel. We talk about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and the decision that they made, and how that they stood for what was right, regardless of the consequences. Peter, I must obey God rather than men. Throughout both testaments, we find example after example of these men who did what was right. And they didn't do what was practical. They didn't do what was pragmatic. They did what was right. And they cast their lot with God. And for some, God delivered them. Others, God did not deliver them. But they stood for what was right either way, and they let the consequences be determined by God. And then all of a sudden, when it comes to politics, we throw all of that aside, Vic, and we say that we can't stand for principle. You know, we can't do what's right in the voting booth. We've got to choose the lesser of two evils. We've got to be practical. We've got to be pragmatic. And we defy and deny the very principles that we espouse Sunday in and Sunday out, that we teach to our boys and girls about every other area of life. I think it's time that God's people start to say, look, I'm not going to support the lesser of two evils anymore. I'm tired of being practical and pragmatic. I'm going to stand for what is right. I'm going to do what is right. I'm going to study the issues. I'm going to study the candidate stands on the issues. I'm going to hold them accountable to what they say, and I'm going to use my vote wisely, and I'm going to vote for who I believe is the best candidate, and regardless of party, and I'm going to stand for what is right and let God determine the outcome. And if we would do that collectively, Christians and evangelicals all across America, if we would do that, can you imagine the difference that would take place in America almost overnight?
And it does behoove us all to stay informed of what's going on, folks. This is why you need to listen to programs that talk about these issues, so you know what the issues are. Too oftentimes people go into the voting booth remembering the certain guy's hairstyle, or whether he's tall or short, or handsome or ugly. Whatever it is, it's got to be more than externals. Let us go right now to Mobile, Alabama, and talk to Earl. Earl, very quickly, you're on the air.
Two questions I want to ask.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do as Christians if the currency goes the other way, and it be a foreign currency? And my other question, I had a felony against me 35 years ago, but they still won't let me vote. They say I'm not a citizen no more. I'll let y'all tell me.
Okay. Chuck.
I'm not sure how to answer that.
He says, what do we do if the currency goes Amero?
Oh, I see.
You don't have much choice, do you?
Well, I think we need to, let's talk about what's going on now. Now we have the opportunity to prevent it. We shouldn't be thinking about what are we going to do then. We need to be thinking about what are we going to do now. We've got to get our pulpits awakened. Back during the fight for independence, it was the Black Regiment, those preachers of the gospel from all Christian denominations who were bold in the pulpit, who stood up and preached for independence and freedom and liberty, gave the biblical principles why we should support that. The people then had the moral and spiritual courage to go out into the respective ways of life and make a difference. That's what the pulpits have got to do in America today. We need to resurrect the Black Regiment.
We have Fallsbury, Maryland on. Julie, you've got about 30 seconds.
Okay, I just want to make people aware, and I'm sure your guest knows about the American Policy Center, the DeWeese report.
Yes.
And so if people can log on to that, AmericanPolicy.org as well. A very brief quote from that: there is no more important fight facing us than stopping the North American Union. If we lose this fight, the Free Republic of the U.S. will cease to exist as we, quote, harmonize our nation with Mexico and Canada. Property rights are basically unknown in Mexico. America's unique judicial system is not the same as Canada. Our ideas of free enterprise and limited government are unheard of in both nations. Our nation has nothing to gain from such a, quote, partnership, but a failed economy and less freedom.
Thank you so much, Julie. Chuck, we're out of here, and I wonder if you'd like to give your email address there or your website.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I would. www.chuckbaldwinlive, chuckbaldwinlive, all one word, .com. chuckbaldwinlive.com.